Hello, good people. This is your guy, Mr. Educator, Mr. Communicator, Mr. Free Thinker, coming back at you live once again from the Lone Star State with another edition of the Media Mike Speaks. And today's hot topic is states trying to pass laws protecting drivers who hit protesters. Can you believe this, good people? States trying to pass laws protecting drivers who hit protesters. Now, I'm going to go over this with you all. And this is something I find quite troubling because it's not going to mention something. And that's what worries me. Now, we all remember, most of you, the protest in North Carolina back in 2017 when the driver drove his vehicle into a crowd of people, killing one, I believe. After this Charlottesville attack, this was happening in Charlottesville, North Carolina, Republican lawmakers sought to distance themselves and create efforts to pass driver immunity legislation. Yeah. Now, since that time, Florida State Senator George Gaynor wanted to make one thing clear. He proposed a bill, but he wanted to make it clear that his bill was never a license to assault demonstrators. While the bill he sponsored in February of I think 2018 at the time, Senate Bill 1096, it would have granted civil immunity to drivers who strike protesters with their vehicles. The fatal assault in Charlottesville is not what he had in mind. Okay, well, where did he get the idea, I wonder? Now, his bill died in May of 2018. They said no. But since that time, similar bills in 4 other states, including North Carolina, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and even Texas, are still on the table. And the bill in North Carolina, good people, passed the House. Now, while the Republican sponsors are walking back some of these proposals in light of the attack in Charlottesville, others are still insisting that they serve drivers and protesters alike. Now, all of these bills would accomplish roughly the same thing. If a driver strikes a demonstrator on a road or freeway and the demonstrator doesn't have a permit to be there. Now, here's the thing. If you do not know this, good people, you have to have a permit to be out marching and protesting. So, if you left your permit at home, I guess, or if you didn't have it on your persons, okay, oh well. The driver that struck you with his vehicle, his or her vehicle, would not be held liable for any injuries, even death. That's what it's called. They're calling it immunity to civil liability only. Now, here's the contradiction. Criminal liability would still apply in an intentional vehicular assault or terror attack like the one in Charlottesville. Okay, well, if the person died, that's a fine line between being charged criminally for the death or being sued civilly by the family. Okay. Now, these bills largely sprung from Black Lives Matter demonstrations over the past few years, including last year, several of which featured scenes of protesters occupying highways around the country. The same tactic has been employed in demonstrations to oppose the election and inauguration of President Donald Trump when he was seeking re-election. But that was a different time. He's no longer president. So, in that sense, these driver immunity laws resemble the so-called stand your ground laws that many of these same states all share. For both kinds of laws, the burden of proof falls on the person who has suffered the casualty. And race is a deciding factor. It's inevitable in establishing whose truth holds up in court. So your word against the individual. Now, as you see here, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed legislation Wednesday that gives certain protesters protections to drivers that strike protesters with their vehicles. Now, let's move on here to the grand old state of Texas. Texas State Representative Pat Fallon, the Republican author of Texas version of this law, House Bill 3432, says that the legislation process will ultimately clarify several important details. His draft is only a placeholder. The final committee substitute would apply civil immunity for drivers only on roadways with a speed limit of 55 miles per hour or greater. Fallon says, and just in circumstances in which a protester lacks a permit, other details will follow. So here we go with that permit thing. The point is to keep protesters off high-speed highways, not empower drivers on blocked streets to take matters to their own hands. Well, sir, it seems that's exactly what you're doing, because that determines or depends on where the protesters protest. Fallon says that the high speeds of Texas highways, many of which boast posted limits of 80 miles per hour, make them incredibly unsafe for people on the roadway, even if they are in high visible, large-scale protests. That's why we don't allow hitchhiking, he says. We don't want people on foot deliberately on a roadway like this. Unquote. Yes, Texas does have some strict hitchhiking laws. You cannot hitchhike in Texas. You can get arrested for that. So, but it depends, sir. People may not take it like that, because once that gets out that you can run over people who are in your way as a protesting, people are going to take it that way. Sends a bad message. Now, Texas isn't the only state to consider such legal protections for motorists encountering protests in the public right of way. Now, North Dakota proposed a similar bill. Now, you can look this up, good people, and I will be doing other videos on how they, meaning state legislators, are enacting laws to arrest or fine people who riot or protest. Also, if you use profanity towards the police, these laws are on the books, with bills, I would say, and they are pushing to become law. So look forward to those videos. Now, the North Dakota law reads, a driver of a motor vehicle who negligently causes injury or death to an individual obstructing vehicular traffic on a public road, street, or highway may not be held liable for any damages. Wow. In total, lawmakers in 6 states have proposed similar legislation this year alone, as detailed in a separate article by Paul Bless. After North Dakota, Tennessee, Florida, Rhode Island, and North Carolina, as I talked about earlier, all flirted with the idea. Only North Carolina's bill, approved by the state's House of Representatives, passed beyond committee. That bill reads as follows. Good people, listen up. A person driving an automobile who is exercising due care and injures another person who was participating in a protest or demonstration and is blocking traffic in a public right-of-way is immune from civil liability for the injury. That bill is expected to be picked up the North Carolina Senate this year or next, according to Bless. Yeah, I think that's going to pass. Well, good people, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. So it looks like the powers that be are making it okay to hit and run. And it looks like due to all the protesting, rioting, and marching, it seems the legislator got together to do some talking. And it looks like they are trying to make it legal to be free to just simply run over people. What's next? Well, the way this is going, it soon will be legal to even protest. All right, good people, sad to say, but that's it for today. And remember, if you have or had a bad day, let's just hope these bills don't pass so these lawmakers don't get their way. This is your guy, Mr. Educated, Mr. Communicated, Mr. Free Thinker. Subscribe, share, and like so that I can keep rocking on the mic. Have a good night.